as sort of a fringe playoff contender, even though, one of their wins was a Division II win, and they sort of didn't even get off the Bucs for the first month of the season when you look at how their record was. They played that great game with Florida State that shocked everybody and I think opened a lot of eyes about Florida State, but then they lose out the entire rest of the month. I was even buying them as a playoff contender until last week. So I do think they could end up getting 3. I'd be really surprised if it was less than 2.
Now, we're talking to Chase Kiddy of HeroSports.com. He's talking about the FCS playoffs. He believes even if ETSU loses to Samford, which would then give the Southern Conference's automatic bid to either Wofford or Furman on tiebreakers, he believes that an 8-victory ETSU team, and they are 8-2, would still make the FCS playoffs. But at what seeding would that be?
I'm guessing that they will be playing a first-round game. I wouldn't totally rule out a seed at this point. For listeners that may be unfamiliar with how the playoffs work, there are 8 seeded teams to get a first-round bye, and everybody else plays next weekend on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I expect East Tennessee State will be playing next weekend in the playoffs. I don't see them getting a bye just because I don't think the strength of schedule has given them the opportunity for some big marquee wins that maybe other programs that already were in the spotlight have. I think it'll be a challenge really for any of these SoCon teams to get a seed at this point. But I think if anybody can do it at this point, it is East Tennessee State, just because they can go beat Stanford, get to 9-2, and then they're sort of sitting there towards the upper crust of the seeded teams, and maybe they make a case and squeeze in there at 7 or 8 at the end.
Intriguing. Very intriguing. How are home games determined?
Basically, there's a bidding process. So it's really hard for even plugged-in guys to sort of figure out who's going to be hosting. We can look at historical data and know that certain schools like to bid a lot of money to get the host spot. Certain schools never bid a lot of money, and they're always on the road for a turn of the playoffs. That's just how it goes. Because of the nature of East Tennessee State's program being sort of new, we don't really have any historical data to know how aggressive the administration is going to be trying to get that home game. So with the Bucs, we're kind of just going to have to wait and see. But yeah, it's a bidding process, and you got to be able to fork over the money if you want the home game.
Chase Kiddy of HeroSports.com. I'm going to give you some historical data from 1996. Because, yes, I actually, as a very young reporter with long hair for this radio station, covered that. And they hosted that. Now, this is ancient history. It's a different athletic director. It's a different, president, all of this. But I will tell you what has changed and what hasn't. They did host the very first playoff game against Villanova. It was disappointing. Drew only 4,700 fans to the game, which you will find low attendance for these early round playoff games because it's not involved in a season ticket package, and so often the games are played during Thanksgiving break, so the students don't go in. There isn't the same sort of vibe. Okay, that's number one. The 4,700 people, in fact, in 1996, I've checked the attendance records. There were 8 playoff games in then Division I AA, and ETSU had the 6th highest attendance out of the 8 playoff teams. There were actually 2 that drew less. But when ETSU dropped football, a lot of people seized on that attendance figure, okay? Then they went to Montana, lost to the Grizzlies, big time. Had they beaten the Grizzlies to go to the Final Four, I remember asking at the press conference, and Mike Cavan, then the head coach at ETSU, saying, we have bid, and if we win this, we will host the Final Four playoff game. So now, say what you will. The basketball program, under a previous athletic director, they like to host those, fringe tournament games. What do they call College Insider, CBI, or whatever it is?
Yeah,
I forgot. Yeah, and you got to pay for that, and you wind up losing money. They did that. It was a previous athletic director. When Steve Forbes was here as the basketball coach, they went to the Vegas 16, which turned out to be the Vegas 8. It was a very disappointing road, and the basketball team at ETSU, they since have said, you know what, thanks a lot, but College Insider, CBI, it's going to be either NCAAs or NIT for us. After that unsatisfying experience in the Vegas 8, which was supposed to be the Vegas 16, they've said, forget about it. You know, we're not going in these fringe tournaments. So if that's anything, if it's the recent basketball, you'd think that ETSU wouldn't spend. Scott Carter played football at ETSU right after that 1996 program, a few years after. So it's that same environment. He spent a lot of time at Tennessee, where you'd think that they would go and, you know, all things considered, pay for those bids. Being Tennessee, the athletic budget's a little bit bigger than it has been in the past. So you've just given me a reason to have Scott Carter on the show and ask him. All right. There you go. So stay tuned for that. Chase, Kiddy, and all the listeners to Tri-Cities Sports Now. I forgive the digression right there, Chase. I apologize, but you wanted to know that. I got one question for you. When is the Ivy League going to take part in the party? They go to the NCAA tournament. Why not this?
I know. It's one of my biggest pet peeves with the FCS football and the way it works, actually. They're totally free to. This isn't an NCAA issue for anybody that's not familiar. The Ivy League chooses not to participate in the playoffs, and the reason they give is basically because of academics. You know, the playoffs would interfere with the end of the semester, exams, and things of that nature, and it's the Ivy League's best priority, and I totally get it. But when you look at how spring sports work in the Ivy League, they participate in all of the playoffs of the spring sports. They had an Ivy League team win the men's Division I lacrosse national championship last year, which takes place sort of at the end of the spring semester.
Interesting.
So it's a very football-specific argument, and I don't understand it. Like I said, I don't have a problem with prioritizing academics, but it's just sort of a weird thing, especially when you look at how good the Ivy League has been this year. Not only top to bottom, there's a lot of depth to the Ivy League. It's been fun to watch. They have a Friday night television package with ESPN. It's been awesome. One of the most interesting leagues to watch. But also the teams at the top are really good. Princeton and Dartmouth are probably both top 15 teams in the FCS. And we don't get to grade them against other top-level competition because they don't participate in the playoffs. It's kind of a bummer for fans.
Yeah, Mercer went up to the Yale Bowl and lost 35-28, for instance. So there you go. And I mean, I know they say no scholarships. I mean, generally speaking, look, yeah, you do have to be a pretty good student. But the idea is if you're a 4.0 and you're good enough to play at a, say, FCS football level, the fact that you're a football player, you're going to get accepted to an Ivy League school because that's the extracurricular activity that gets you in. That's the idea. And then they start looking at, you know, scholarships for left-handed people from Appalachia or whatever to help you out a little bit with the books. So, you know, they say no scholarship. There are ways that you can get around that you don't have to go into $200,000 in debt to, you know, play at Dartmouth or wherever. I mean, you know, so it is, but it isn't, is that sort of thing. There are, anyway. Chase, do you know of any other ways that they try to help out the football players in the Ivy League since we're on the subject?
I think it's kind of what you said is, hey, you know, we're going to put you on an academic scholarship that we like your 4.3 GPA. And by the way, we noticed there's pretty sweet tight ends, too. So, you know, if you want to come play for our football team on your academic scholarship, I think that kind of thing happens, no doubt. But, I mean, scholarship or no scholarship, it's still the quality of the football teams up there, particularly this year, the last couple of years, it's been really high. And I don't know, I guess I'm selfish. I know I'm an analyst, I'm a writer and all these things, but I'm a fan first. A lot of these days I'm just kind of selfish, and I want to see the Ivy League teams play the playoffs.
That would be kind of, you know, seeing Yale compete for another sort of a national championship. They've got so many from the 19th century, my goodness, you know, and all that. I still love when College Game Day went to Harvard for the Harvard-Yale game, yeah. And there was a person who held up a sign, and it read, "Abolish the forward pass." That was. They're just clever right there. That's just great. Anyway, speaking though of clever, I know the FCS committee. You mentioned how they have been announcing their sort of top 10 seeding on the Wednesday ESPN college football game between a couple of Who Cares FBS teams. Is that consistent? I mean, if we watch the Wednesday night football game on ESPN this week, don't even ask me who it is, but will we see the FCS committee top 10 rankings released at that time? Is that a thing?
I can't, to be honest with you, I know they do it at the beginning of November. I'm not sure if they do it every week. I think it might just be a one-time thing. I could be wrong about that, but I know they definitely released it here about 13 days ago. And it's just sort of, it's not even the full list. It's sort of a snapshot, top 10 snapshot.
But it would give an idea of where the top,
exactly.
The seedings are. And for instance, this was October 27th that you put out. North Dakota State, number 1. James Madison, number 2, which, they were 6 and 2 at the time. And are you running on memories there? UC Davis, Weber State, Elon, Kennesaw State, number 6, South Dakota State, and then Wofford. This was before they lost. But Wofford was number 8. So talking about the possibilities of maybe getting that number 8 bid at the stadium that should be named after John Robert Bell. Well, there you go. Anyway, that's what you got to go on right there. A 9-2 ETSU team possibly making a bid. I do want to ask you this. Why is the SoCon so down?
I mean, there was a lot of turnover last year, so I think that's a big part of it. There's been, the last 5 to 10 years, go back 10 years in SoCon and look at who was in that conference and who sort of the powers that be were. And now you look at it now, there's been heavy turnover in the conference. There have been teams that have moved up. You have programs that aren't necessarily used to being a year-to-year forefront team in that conference that are trying to build their way into that, into the ruins of programs like App State, Georgia Southern, and sort of the more traditional FCS powers that are no longer on this level. I think that has something to do with it. Maybe there's not year-to-year stability with every single program. I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. To ETSU's credit, they have sort of sent this power back and stepped into it this year and made the most of it. And they're going to be playing the postseason for my money.
All right. So there you go. He thinks win or lose. Chase Kiddy of HeroSports.com, and he's a bracketologist. He has ETSU making the college football playoffs, along with your gut tells you 2 teams from the Southern Conference. And, what do you think? I know the odds makers say ETSU is a 10-point dog. I went on the record thinking that Samford would have something to play for in this game and that they would beat ETSU. And I, being a bad guy sports talk show host, said, ETSU won't win another game this year and all. Now that really all Samford has to play for is if, Devlin Sibley is able to throw for 300, and that's not his name. Anyway, if Devlin is able to throw for 317 yards, if he will become the all-time FCS passer, that's what Samford has to play for. But let me ask you, do you think ETSU beats Samford?
I do, yeah. I think the bye sort of, I think it's a little weird to see a team with a bye week on November 10th when the regular season ends on November 17th. That's sort of a quirky thing that happened with ETSU's schedule. But I do think having an off week going into this game where they can, they have everything to play for, they can clinch an outright SoCon title. I think they find a way to win, and I do follow handicapping quite a bit. And I'm kind of surprised to hear. I hadn't seen the line here. I'm kind of surprised to hear they're a 10-point dog there at home. I mean, I know Stanford's been cooking the last
It's always about where the money is going. And one thing that I'll tell you this, Chase Kiddy, people in East Tennessee don't necessarily gamble. So, who's going to bet on ETSU? And I think that needs to be looked at as a reason why the number might be down. It's one thing for the Vols to get people to bet on them. Okay, all the degenerates in East Tennessee, they will bet on the Tennessee Volunteers, so that might influence the number a little bit. I thought it influenced the number against West Virginia, for instance, in the opener. But, this was Tennessee was the last state next to Utah to have a lottery. All right, so that should tell you. I mean, just gambling around. I did this show in 1996 under a previous incarnation. I had a co-host. He did not know how point spreads worked. Okay, I mean, that's just the culture around here is not as conducive to gambling as it would be, certainly in New Jersey or Nevada, but even, in like a major city or something like a place with action. East Tennessee doesn't have a whole lot of action, except for this show, Chase. Chase Kiddy, you can get more action if you read Chase Kiddy's stories on FCS football and herosports.com, and he's been following this. He's got a nice one out. Playoff committee sends strong message about strength of schedule, and so that could hurt the Bucs, yes, but Chase doesn't think it will. He thinks they're in the field of 24 and ranked number 19 with some Ivy League teams that are going to turn down a berth to the playoffs. He might be right, in my opinion. Tri-Cities Sports Now will come back if I got enough time to talk about the Predators. 1:30, Jerry Bonkowski and David Pearson. Tri-Cities Sports Now.
Plans take a turn.